So it's May 18th, 1998, and we're in the car. I'm over here with my Aunt Dorothy. And so we're just going to ask her some questions about some of her memories. And so I'm just going to ask you, Dorothy, why don't you state your full name for the recorder?
My name is Dorothy Ann Therese Klein.
Therese Klein.
Therese.
Beautiful. And what year were you born?
1938 in Hazleton, Pennsylvania.
In Hazleton. At the hospital in Hazleton.
At the hospital in Hazleton. And I was only pounds and 15 ounces.
Wow.
I was close to 3, but
Oh
I didn't make
God,
3.
That's amazing.
And I was a 7-month baby.
Oh, so you were premature.
I was premature.
Now, at that time, did they have facilities to deal with that, or?
No, I had it. I was baptized in the hospital, and I stayed in the hospital till I was 5 pounds.
Wow.
But my father told me that if it wasn't for my mother, he said, like, when you were very tiny, like a little bitsy-witsy doll. And when I came home, they said she actually, like, formed my head, you know, because it was, I guess, I don't know what it was, but they said in the care that she gave, because I was so tiny.
Sure.
And he said, like, she didn't really know what she was doing, but
Sure.
he said she really took such great care. So I often think about that. Like, here was a young woman, didn't know a whole lot about a little teeny tiny baby, but she gave me great care.
Yes.
That was powerful. That's a wonderful story. And to know that he told me that.
Yeah.
You know?
Hang on just a second, Dorothy. Okay, sorry about that. So what was the date?
The day that I was born?
Yeah.
February 22nd, 1938.
Okay. So your parents then were living in Hazleton at that time? They weren't living in Freeland yet?
No, they were in Hazleton.
Okay. And they were living with, who were they living with? Your dad's
with Mary.
Sister?
Yeah, with Mary. It was just my mother and father and Mary. Well, basically, to tell you the truth, when I was that tiny, when they was born, I don't know where they were.
Oh, really?
Well, I was too tiny to know that
right,
at that time, you know, like when you're asking that.
Right.
I was trying to think, you know, but I know that we lived on a street up in Hazleton. I can't think of the name of it now, but I remember living there when we were little kids, so maybe that was the house we went into.
So you remember the move to Freeland then? Do you remember it?
I don't remember it.
You don't remember it?
I don't remember moving. Isn't that funny that you're saying that? Because I never thought of that.
Huh.
I just remember being there.
Right.
So I must have been little when I went over there. But I don't know how little, because when we were in Hazleton, we lived next door to a Jewish family.
Oh, really?
And we have pictures. I have pictures.
Yeah.
And they were, I remember Fagel, I remember the little boy. And they did those little Jewish celebrations. They had like a tent in their yard. I can remember all of that.
Oh, right.
And for the different...
Yeah.
It just was, and then
were
I
they
remember...
Orthodox?
Probably.
Okay.
Yeah. And I can still see him. He had his little skull cap on him, you know, like on the picture and all. Yeah. And, but I remember those kids. And the other thing I remember was that we, I don't know which one of us did it, but somewhere along the line, we threw a handful of dirt into their house.
Oh,
we got in trouble.
So were those would you say those are your earliest memories?
The early, yeah. And then we got in a car. It was parked. I think it was my father's on that street. I'm still trying to, I know the name. It's just not coming to me, but I can see it there. Because I've seen that house where we lived. But we were in we all got in the car and let the brake go or something. We went down the hill a little bit, but someone got us, you know.
Sure.
But I remember that little story, too. Yeah, that's what stories are. I mean, isn't it funny when things are, you remember those kinds of things?
Yeah.
But I can remember being in that yard, you know, with those kids.
Yeah.
And that Jewish thing. Isn't that funny how I can actually remember that? Yeah.
So what kind of kid were you? To your own recollections and other things people would say. What kind of child were you?
That's a marvelous question.
Well, thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome. I think I'm trying now, as a little kid, I think I was a happy little kid, because when I see my baby picture, you know, I was a very, very happy little, darling. And I'm trying to think of anything sad that I can't, you know, like I just remember playing a lot, you know.
With Mary?
Probably, because there wouldn't be anybody else to play with, you know what I mean? And then we made our first communion together, you know. I remember how that was fun.
So how many years apart are you and Mary?
Just a year.
A year? Wow. Okay.
Yeah, in 1 year. Mm-hmm. And the thing, I guess I was trying to remember too, like when we were older though, I remember having a big fight with her, and I chased her with a knife.
Oh my God! You remember what you're fighting about?
No, I don't. But I remember that my mother grabbed me or something. But I was so mad at her.
Oh yeah.
She slammed the door. But whatever it was, you know.
Sure.
But I can remember getting that mad.
Wow.
That mad. I got mad.
That's interesting.
But whatever it was, I don't remember. Recall. But at least I asserted myself. I wasn't going to let her do whatever she wanted to.
Yeah.
She was making me mad, obviously.
Right.
So I can remember doing that though. Like just to pick up. Well, that was pretty violent, but I mean, whatever it was, I was going to get it back at her.
She must have deserved it.
I was getting back at her.
So what are some earliest memories of your mom and dad?
I guess I'm going way back. Thinking in, like in Hazleton, you have to see Janetti's store. It had like a sliding board.
Where your dad worked.
Where he worked. And it wasn't a slide, but when the boxes of all kinds of things would come into that store, like, I can't even describe it. If you worked in a grocery store, the trucks would come in and everything would go down these chutes, you know what I mean?
Sure.
Well, he let us slide down those chutes. And when we would go in, we'd go in the back and we'd just and that was a wonderful memory to slide down. I always, remember, used to love to go there.
Sure.
And then also where he was, my mother would take us. It was like Janetti's Tyrolean room. I heard it called the Tyrolean room.
Mm-hmm.
And we'd go to that Tyrolean room and she'd take us there to eat.
Mm-hmm.
And, I just loved it. It was just such a marvelous room, like for little kids to go into. It was really nice. But that whole store today is demolished. There's no more Janetti's on Laurel Street, But that was so much fun to go and see him and visit him, and because he had fun in the store.
Mm-hmm.
I liked that as a little kid, And I had a lot of fun, like as a little one. I don't know how old I am now. I'm trying to think, but like my father and my mother too. But like they were great for Christmas. Like great Christmases, and that they're good memories. And like in the summer, like we would go. We did wonderful things in the summer. All of us, the whole family.
Mm-hmm.
We'd go like to Hickory Run, or we'd go up to Lake Wallenpaupack. And we'd go with like the Matavies and the beer truck, different places. We'd all sit in the back of this beer truck. It was just great. All these kids sitting in the back of this truck, and that was fun. We were all there. They were with the Chimneys to different places. Remember one time going with them, and we had some kind of a corn roast, and I just had a great time there. That the corn was wrapped in silver paper and stuff. But it was always. And then we went in a boat. I remember my father took us in a boat. We all went in on that lake. That was fun. I think growing up, like up until my mother died, I think we had a lot of fun in our family. It was like a wonderful. I mean, I just remember just enjoying myself as a kid.
Right.
I don't ever remember. I am trying to say I'd like to see sad. Like the only thing like my father did that made me mad, I think, was when I was in 6th grade. I climbed a tree. I got up real high, and I saw him coming home from work, and I yelled to tell him how proud I was to be so high. But he just stood there, didn't say a word.
Wow.
And then I was so disappointed because he wasn't like saying, "Yay, wow, look how good you look up that high." I said, "I can even go higher," and I went as higher. Well, anyway, he stood, never said a word. I came down, and when I got down, he just whacked me on the behind, just one whack.
Sure.
And that's all he did. And then I got the message. It took me a while, but I got like, you don't climb trees. You don't climb trees. So it wasn't until years later that it dawned on me, like, yeah, you could have fell and hurt yourself, but he didn't say anything, But that was 6th grade. But that was sort of like hard. And I remember that. I can feel that kind of like pain, because I wanted him to be proud.
Yeah, of course.
That's funny.
Of course.
It was funny.
So you're pretty active. You were running around.
Oh, yeah.
Doing different things.
Oh, yeah. And I loved his horse. I had a horse, not mine, but on our street.
Yeah.
It was Butch. Well, there were 3 of them, Blue Bill and Jenny. And this Bill Davis, he had the barn. And I just would go over to the horses all the time. But I used to ride bareback
Really?
Or take Butch a lot. Oh, yeah.
Oh.
I had a wonderful time with him. And
Where would you ride?
we could ride all over in the back of our house, down the woods, anywhere. And
so the woods are pretty big.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. We went to the Greenies, like Katie and Peggy, Mary and myself. I mean, there was a lady up in Huffman's, and she was one of the Nozel girls, whatever. She'd take us to the Greenies, it was called. And we'd take our little lunches. We'd go down, see the frogs jumping around.
Yeah.
We had a wonderful time. We used to walk to the Greenies a lot. You know, it was the best place to go. And she'd pack, this lady, Mrs. Nozel, whatever her name, she worked in Huffy's. She would take us all down, you know, and we just have a good time down there.
Right.
I loved going with her.
Right.
And, but one of the memories I remember of my mother was, we used to always have, it was like, in back of our house, it was like a carnivals would come. And one year the gypsies were there, and Peggy and I got to know the gypsies. There was a little boy and a girl, and we played with them and all. We took them up to the house, and we just had a wonderful time. And for that time of that carnival, we got to be friends with them and got to know them. And they were nice kids. And but one night at the carnival, I was with my mom, and this I can still see this. You know, this guy she was trying to win this. She was trying to win this one thing. I think it was for Katie. She was trying to get it for something that she was trying to win.
Yeah.
And he kept saying, "Oh, you know, it'll come up, you know." And she sent me up to the house for more money.
Oh, really?
But she lost all the money. She never won. He was doing that, you know. But I didn't know that.
Sure.
I didn't know that. She didn't know that. You know, we really didn't know.
Right.
And but I'll never forget her telling me to go get that money, and I got it. But she lost it all. And that did something to me. You know, like, the good thing that it did to me was it taught me that you don't gamble. You know, you don't you do that for fun, but you don't do that for, like, it was like I was young enough to get that message. You know, like, and it taught me, because I remember standing there with her, you know, and how sad she was after that, because she lost that money and the extra money, and she had nothing. You know what I mean? And so that was just to see her sadness. It was hard. I remember that, you know, walking back, how disappointed she was. And but the thing that I learned was, you don't do that with money because you're gonna lose it. You know what I mean?
Right.
So
that is interesting.
it was something that I learned there about money real early on.
Yeah.
You know, like, you can throw it away too, and if you choose to, you have nothing.
Yeah.
You know.
Yeah.
So if you're gonna use money, use it on the things that you really would enjoy. You know, like, have real enjoyment with it. You know, like, so. But like early on, when I was like 13 and up, I used to always work. I babysat a lot. I liked that, and met a lot of Jewish families. Went up, you know, when they'd go go traveling, I'd go with them up to Connecticut.
Oh,
you know,
that's interesting.
Yeah, it was a.
I didn't know there were so many Jewish families around Freeland.
Oh yeah, the
There's
Scotts,
big
the
population.
Hurwitzes, the Franklins.
So there's synagogues in Freeland, though?
Yeah. Oh yeah, I used to go down with the kids, and I learned the whole Hebrew alphabet. You know, and I could, you know, like, because Mark and Susie I was with a lot. There were a lot of things I learned, you know, from, like, when I entered the convent as a freshman, you had to do term papers.
Sure.
I did it on the history of the Jewish people.
Wow.
But I could put so much personal in
Sure,
it.
yeah.
And then they said at the college that no one had ever written one like that.
Oh my God, that's exciting.
And I got an A on that too.
That's great.
And the reason was because I was at all the Hanukkah celebrations, all the Purim.
Sure.
No matter what I was present to them.
Would you drink at Purim?
Oh yeah.
Would you really?
Oh yeah, everything that was going on, because I was always there, and I was I had to do the dishes, you know, like that was my job, you know. But they were not just, they were just a nice group to learn from.
Yeah.
Susan and Mark were very, very nice.
Now there were a couple that you worked for then?
Yeah, they were older, and the kids, Susan and Mark, were young.
Oh, okay, Susan and Mark were young.
They were the children, the kids. But Susan, it was interesting. Years later, I went to see Jane Hurwitz. Jane was the mother, Jane Hurwitz, and she wanted to talk to me, and I said to her, "What's wrong?" And she said, "I just want you to know, Susan is going to marry a Catholic boy."
Oh, really?
And she met him down at the Library of Congress. Susan worked in the Library of Congress. and that's where she met him. And so I talked to her. I said, Jane, I said, he's probably a very nice boy. I said,
Yeah.
I said, and Susie, I said, is very, very good. I said, she's a good girl, you know. I said, and she came to all the May processions with me, you know, like the kids, no matter what I was doing, I'd take them to St. Anne's Church, you know. So she knew about, you know, from me, you know. And so I think that because Susan had that experience with me, she was sort of comfortable,
She was
you know.
a little more open to this.
Yeah, she was comfortable. I know that, you know. So
it wasn't. I'm sorry.
No, and I was just going to say Mark used to stutter like crazy.
Oh, really?
And there was like he had always go to the psychologist, and because of this stuttering, and then I had to go to the psychologist to see what the problem was with Mark, because they wanted everybody to see what it was. And when I went in to him, he asked me about Mark stuttering. I said, he doesn't stutter around me. And he never did.
Sure.
I never heard him stutter. I said, he doesn't stutter when he's with me.
Interesting.
You know, and I taught him how to ride a bike.
Yeah.
You know, he's a fun kid. I mean, he
spent a lot of time.
Nobody, how could I say, like, wanted to put up with Mark, you know what I mean? Because I thought he was cranky and all this kind of stuff. I mean, but he would listen to me, you know, so. He was just so thrilled when I taught him how to ride that bike. Just thrilled.
Do you have any idea what they're doing now?
Mark is like an administrator out at Mount Sinai in Milwaukee.
Oh my goodness, he lives in Milwaukee?
He came to your house
to
visit me. Oh yeah. I don't know if he's still there.
That's
wild. And Susan's in Alaska. She got married.
Wow. Is that Catholic?
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, she married. I have, you know, their addresses, and I haven't seen Susan for a long time. But Mark was at your house the one time.
That's
I called him on the phone, and he came over. But his mother and father are both dead.
Okay.
Yeah.
So do you remember any animosity between your parents or other people in the community about the Jews or the Catholics? I mean, in terms of you working over there, did people talk about each other or anything like that? You remember anything like that?
No. The only memory that I ever have that made me just trying to figure something out was when I was little. I was over at my Mamie's and Granddaddy's in Hazelton, and I was sleeping upstairs, and when I woke up, well, it probably was late around noon, everybody else was in the kitchen, like Katie and Mary and Peggy. They were eating, and Mamie was serving lunch, you know, and I was standing by the steps. I was little, and my mother said, come on, you know, you have to eat lunch now. And I said, I don't want lunch, I want breakfast. And she said, you have to have, you need to eat what they're eating now, you know, like. And my grandfather was sitting in a chair, and he said, if she wants breakfast, give her breakfast. And he told Mamie to go get me a dish of cereal. And I was just so thrilled, because that was my grandfather, and I thought, boy, did I like him after that, you know what I mean? And I had my cereal.
That's good.
So it was a good memory, you know, that was a good one.
Yeah.
But the question that you were just asking was, one day I asked him, my grandfather, I said, Daddy, I said, Granddaddy, I said, could you tell me, I said, where did, the Klein and us, is that, I said, is that Jewish or German? Because I said, you know, there's Abe Klein in Hazelton. There were only 3 Kleins. Joseph, my father, John, his brother, and Abe. And I knew Abe was Jewish because I had worked with all those Jewish people.
Sure.
And I said, you know, where did the Klein come from? And he said to my father in the kitchen that day, he said, Joe, he said, tell her not to ask any questions like that anymore. And that was the end of it. He never answered the question. You know, and I sort of, that was his answer. So I often wondered if we were German or Jewish.
That's very interesting.
But then years later, I don't know who was saying that, somebody said that he worked in the Gerhardt factory in Hazelton, and it was owned and run by Jews, and maybe Granddaddy had a hard time with him. So that's where I picked that up then,
That's interesting.
So I don't know what that all meant.
Sure.
You know, but someone did say that,
That's very interesting.
So I try to put that together, and if he had to work for him, you know. Yeah. But he worked in New York before he came to Hazelton, I know that. So Wavy Gerhardt's were, I don't know the history of it, but I remember that, story.
So it really wasn't until later in your life that you started to encounter racism or religious intolerance?
Well, see, I never knew the word ever in Freeland, The first time I was in a car with my father, and we were on our way to someplace and maybe going over up to Mamie's or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
And on the corner, I looked out the window and I saw a mother and a father and like a couple kids, but they were all black.
Huh.
And I turned. It was the first time in my whole life I'd ever seen anything other than myself.
Sure.
Because we didn't have TV growing
Right,
up. You know?
sure.
And I said to my father, Daddy, who's that? Who are they?
Yeah.
And he said, well, they're niggers.
Right,
Niggers,
right,
he said.
right.
They're niggers.
Yeah.
And I said, oh, that's my first experience
Sure.
about niggers. That's
Right.
how I learned it.
Right.
He didn't say Negro, he said niggers. They're
Sure.
the niggers. Yeah.
Right, right.
And so that was the first time I ever saw them.
Huh.
I had no other experience with them.
Mm-hmm.
I went all through high school, never knew anything else except going through school. That's all. And I mean, there was, I guess the only thing I ever knew was different was like the Polish people, women on the way to school, they all were like on their porches.
Mm-hmm.
They'd have babushkas on and they'd all be speaking Polish to each other.
Interesting.
That's the only thing, you know, nothing else. But I remember in high school, someone brought a black girl to speak, and I don't know what country she was from, but I remember trying to put that in my head, like, wait, where'd she come from?
Sure, fit it into like
how did that happen?
Work,
you know, yeah. So, but it wasn't until like after a couple of years in the convent, that I was in a car with a black sister, and we were coming, forget where we were at some place, you know, and I said to her, can I ask you something? And she said yes, and I said, you know, I have never been around black people, anybody's skin any other the color than mine.
Yeah.
And I said, and I don't know if I understand, like I was trying to say to her, like where do you come from? You know, like I was trying to figure this out for myself, you know, and how, where do you live?
Right, right.
You know, like,
sure, right.
like how come I never saw you before? Like, where do you come from?
Sure.
I mean, I know I come from Freeland. Where do you come from?
Right.
And she was so nice, and she just started to talk to me and help me, you know, and the way she explained it. And it was such a grace, you know, the way, because she was able to say that to me. And I was just so impressed, you know, like because of the way she did it with me, and there was never any fear in me, you know, or I'd never had to be worried or afraid,
right.
And so I was always comfortable. The only thing that ever made me confused was like Mary would, and Joe, like they would make these real hard, fearful comments, you know what I mean, like, well, you better be careful and all this, you know. But I wasn't sure what I had to be careful about or what that meant, you know.
Or you never saw any evidence yet of it.
No, I didn't know what that meant because my experience so far was positive, you know, like that. So it was, but now, you know, it's interesting that you're saying that the first time in the history of our order that we're working with multiculturalism and that we have to, not have to, but I mean we're going to be able to be more inclusive, you know, like we've...
The Sisters of Mercy, you mean?
Yeah, we're going to be more inclusive. And, but up until that point, you know, as far as like sisters coming to the order who were from other cultures, you know, I mean, we have lots of sisters from other cultures, but they were never like around us, do you know what I mean?
Sure,
They were in their countries, like they're either in Guyana or Brazil or Chile or wherever they all are, you know. But they're all over. There's loads of them. There's, like, if you have a conference, you'd see hundreds of them. You know what I mean?
Right.
But this summer, last summer at Scranton U, we had a big conference, and when I saw so many of them, I couldn't believe, you know, like all these different women were from all these different countries. And one woman got up and she was so angry because she said that all these people came and see, they only could speak their language, and there were no interpreters for them, and people were speaking, and then they questioned that, you know, like,
sure, of course.
Why, you know, how could you have this going on? And and because we're not aware of what this, you know, and I remember that one woman getting up and saying that, and she was from another country, and but they positioned a lot of our sisters that could speak Spanish close to them so that they can understand. But I was at a table with a nun who brought maybe about 10 women and men from Texas, and boy, that was an education for me at that table because they were into all kinds of things that I wasn't even aware of. You know, like where I work in a hospital, like they were doing all their kinds of things, you know, that just amazed me. It was within, like the poor in Texas, you know. So it was just good to know that there's so much going on all over the place. But you know, one of the things that I think helped me really and truly was the fact that I think working with, like when I was very little, I stayed with Hannah Doyle, and they were like friends. They lived next door to us. My mother lived in an apartment in Hazelton. It wasn't that house I'm trying to think of, but there was like an apartment there. And Hannah Doyle, Lorraine, or Emily rather, and Jack. Emily and Jack, they were married. They were Emily and Jack Doyle, and Jack's mother was Hannah Doyle. And because they were next door where we lived, they would take me different places. Like they'd take me to Philadelphia, and I'd go on the trolley, you know.
Right.
And Jack, he did some kind of work as a salesman. I'd be in the car with him, and we'd be going all around the place, and he'd be buying me, you know, soda and everything. And it was just a little thing. But I loved going to Philly because I remember the trolleys, and then I remember I had loads of pictures with his little hat on me, his army hat. But I'd love to go to Emily someday and ask her for some of those pictures. You know,
yeah.
I'd love to get them. And then I'm trying to think, like Hannah Doyle, she went to Mass every day. She's an older woman up to the German church there. And I was just a little girl, and I went with her all the while I stayed with her, you know, into this church and back. And that put in me something of the sacred, you know, as a very small, you know, little person.
Sure.
Because I'm sure I didn't know what was going on in the Mass, you know, because it was always in Latin. And up there, I would just go with her. But being in that place, you know, like, it's like that there was something sacred. And then going with her, you know. And then Emily Emily was Lutheran, and but Jack, who she married, was Catholic. And when I was confirmed, Emily brought me the statue of the Little Flower of St. Therese. And that just always touched me,
Oh,
you know.
that's nice.
So that was a wonderful thing to happen. So that was another, you know, it's like when you have experiences like that, you're sort of comfortable with people.
Yeah.
You know, like.
Kind of boosts your faith in people.
Yeah, like I've never not like I was never uncomfortable. You know, I think because of all the different experiences. Like the Jewish people, you know, like from the time I was 13 until I was 18, I had lots of experiences with, you know, with Hadassah and everything. You know, I did lots of things with them. You know, so I knew a lot, and I knew that's why I could do that whole term paper. You know, and aware of all of that.
Yeah.
And being so very comfortable, because I, like a lot of the sisters, they didn't know what locks were, you know. They didn't know what if you go get, you know, the bagels, of course, but they didn't know that history, you know, like or to get more the crackers, I'm saying it, I can't say it, but it's matzah, yeah, and. You know, even after I entered, I remember getting a box of matzahs. You know, they came up to visit me. You know, they brought me the matzah. You know, so, but like different people have different experiences. But I think that's what gave me a good experience of being with people.
Now you mentioned before about sort of multiculturalism coming into the order now, and I was thinking while you were talking about that, what things would you say? What are some of the major things that have changed in your belief system about maybe Catholicism since you were young? And maybe an example would be, you know, the sisters that taught you with Mom or Peggy saying, you know, that everybody else would go to hell and things like that. I mean, do you still believe, what things do you think have adjusted in you, maybe philosophically, or maybe more in terms of the policies of the Catholic Church have changed in you since you went into the convent or when you were little? What things have changed in you?
Okay, I'm going back to when you said the word hell.
For sure.
See, that was not my experience.
Oh, really?
No. See, that's why I thought about that. I think, like, when we were going through grade school, like, I can remember Sister Augusta, first grade. It was a wonderful experience with her. She was just a talented nun, you know, like, so I remember in first grade, I was going to be a nun just like her when I grew up, you know, because she was great, and she was a good teacher, you know, like, enjoyed it. In second grade, Sister Mary John, she was old, you know, real old, and the thing that I didn't like about her, we had to do this writing, like, it's like cursive and all this good writing, and you had to write a certain way, Palmer method, you know, and if you didn't stay on the lines where you're done, she'd whack you with this ruler, you know. God. So I wanted to get that, you know, get that, you know, and but the part that intrigued me was, like, see, at that time, my mother must have been sick or something happened, but because I wasn't aware to know what was going on, but we had to go to Hazleton, and I had to go up to St. Gabriel's. Mary and I had to go to St. Gabriel's School. So I was put in the first grade in St. Gabe's.
Right near Peggy's house?
Yeah, right near. Yeah,
St. Gabe's.
St. Gabe's, there, right there. So I went to that school for first grade, and Mary went for second grade. I had Sister Patrick, I remember her. And see, I was already in first grade at St. Anne's, you know, because I had Augusta, who I liked. And but I remember for some reason when I got there to that school that it was time to make First Communion and preparation. So I made First Communion in the first grade. When Mary was in second grade.
Oh, wow.
So she made it because in St. Anne's you only make it in second grade. You know?
That's interesting.
But the two of us made it together then. And it was just a wonderful time. Getting ready for it. You know, like, I just remember all of it was like wonderful in my memory, in my mind, whatever I was learning about God, you know. But it wasn't nothing fearful, ever.
Right.
But the greatest moment that I can remember as the little girl coming in to the church, it came in procession, like in St. Gabe's, a little boy and girl, and I had because I was tiny, you know, the leader with him, Alan was his name, I remember him. And, but coming around, as I were coming around, I saw Aunt Hannah, that I was telling you about, who went to Mass with her every day.
Yeah.
She was in the pew there, and she waved to me. There was such an excitement in me that she came for my first communion.
Yeah.
Oh, I love that. And but I always, to me, First Communion was still in me the same way. And to me, it was like something that, again, with the sacred. And I loved it. I didn't know what it was, but I know I loved it. You know, there was something that I loved. I really, and then I went back over to St. Anne's again, and I was in the second grade, and with Sister John again, and I tried to tell her that I made my first communion, you know, and I already did do that, you know, like, and she wasn't like real kind, you know, kind of a person. Like she would tell me that I had to do it again or something, you know, and I didn't understand that, you know, like, and I thought, how could you do it again if you did it once? You did it yourself. Right. But it was like that was just, I didn't do it again, you know, but it was like I wasn't trying to be special or different, you know. I just did it. That's all I, you know. Sure. But in other words, I must have mixed up her class because what is she going to do with me?
Exactly. Yeah.
So I just remember that was like a confusing thing then that I didn't understand, and I sort of like a little kid said, I must have put it in there with religion somewhere, you know, like, wow, you know, like, how come, you know, she doesn't understand this, you know, like, and I do. But anyway, all the way through, like, third grade, I remember, fourth grade was Sister Jude, I think third and fourth together, or no, Sister Renee was there.
I remember all of them.
And Sister Jude, she was, well, the thing that I remember about her, she was teaching us in fourth grade, and I was already in Dallas, out of Dallas, going on for my master's, and that woman never even had a bachelor's.
Oh, my goodness.
She was going to college in the summer to get that degree.
Wow.
And that impressed me, you know, like, you know, to know that those women, what they had endured, you know, like how they were told to go and do what they did, you know. And I never, you know, realized that until, you know, years later, that the sisters went out and taught us like that. You know, they didn't even have degrees themselves.
Wow.
But anyway, then 6th grade was Felicita, and she was terrible.
Oh, really?
She whacked my shin up against the thing, and you dumb Klein, you're like your other sisters.
Really?
Oh, it's just crazy.
Good.
And one day, I had broken my arm. I was at Janetti's. Father had we had this Stofas over where Stofas swimming pool was. All these Janetti's outings. Oh, they were wonderful.
Oh, yeah. Picnics.
And, well, we used to love them. But anyway, I fell off a cliff because I was playing Cowboys and Indians.
Sure.
And I pretended I was the stagecoach that went over, but I broke the wrist.
Oh, no.
But it was 6th grade, and I was in a cast and all that. And the part that intrigued me was, like, Felicita had no mercy on me. Like, the book fell out of the desk, just down, out. And I had to bend over to pick it up. Now you've got cast, it's hard, you know.
Yeah.
And I put it in, and all the other books fell out on the other side.
Sure.
She came and she picked me up, and she swung me, and that whole desk I went right through the cloakroom, right to the back.
God.
Well, they were all out. And then I was scared. Oh, I was so scared. And so from that moment on, I just remember being frightened. But up until then, I have wonderful young memories, you know, of God. You know what I mean? And what I didn't tell you about was, like, if you remember when I was talking about Emily Doyle, who's Lutheran. See, my mother sent me with Emily every Sunday to the Lutheran church, and I went to Lutheran Sunday school
I remember you
with
telling me
Emily.
about her.
And I had my own little corner and my own little book, but Katie ruined the book. She scribbled all over it and messed it up, and they was probably through it. But I loved that book.
Sure.
I remember the Good Shepherd was on the front of it. But it was something I treasured, you know.
Now, why'd your mom send you there?
With Emily.
Why?
Because Emily wanted to know if she could take me.
Oh.
And see, when you think about that, you think about my mother, you know, like years ago, obviously, you know, that wasn't a problem with a Catholic woman.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean?
Sure.
To send me. That couldn't have been, you know what I
Yeah,
mean?
that's true.
Because I went, and
Yeah, that's true.
I loved it. I went there for 2 years, you know, in that corner. And I had fun. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
So that was a wonderful experience. And see, and I think the younger experiences that you have with God, if they're good experiences, that remains with you.
Right.
There's it's like a spiritual mysticism, and it's inside you. Like, it gives you like a mystic ability, you know. But if it's not given to you when you're very young, I don't think you can. You have to search for it then.
Right.
And search. But I just know I had it, you know, and because of those experiences.
Right.
And like if I when I tell that story, anybody say, "What do you mean you went to Lutheran Sunday school?" They look at me like I was crazy, you know.
Yeah.
Well, I did. My mother sent me for 2 years, and I went.
Yeah.
You know, and I said it was great. That book, the book was the thing. I'd still love to find that book.
Yeah.
That meant so much to me.
So if you had a great sort of like early understanding that everyone had something to offer, maybe, and there definitely wasn't anything threatening about Judaism or Lutheranism when you were growing up.
No.
So then when you got older, was there a time in your studies where philosophically you looked at Judaism or Lutheranism and had problems with them, or had to say, had to sort of, I don't know, I had sort of this is why there's all this talk about, this is why Ed and Katie are having a problem getting married, or this is why, you know what I mean? When did it hit you that this was a problem for other people? You know what I mean? Or when did you have to sort of draw some lines in your own belief systems?
See, I'm trying to put that together in my head. I just know that it was important for me. There was something in me that was like that I liked. Like an example would be like, I was afraid of the dark as a little kid. My mother took me to Grant's or Newberry's, whatever. She told me to pick out a picture, and I wouldn't be afraid of the dark. And I picked out the little flower, and I put it in the room, and I was never afraid of the dark after that.
No.
I mean, that was marvelous. And I had made great devotion to the saint since then, you know.
Yes.
But that was a wonderful thing for a mother to do for a little kid, you know. I think that my experience of being a Catholic, a little girl, and then in high school, and then I think the desire that I want like there was always a desire in me to be spiritual. It was very important to know spirituality, you know. But it wasn't important for me. My mind never. It wasn't important for me to know religion or to know all of that. Wasn't important, you know.
Like the politics of different religions.
No,
right.
no, that was not. But the spirituality was. That meant, like, that was important. That's what I wanted. That's what I thought religious life would give me, you know. And I just think that that's why I often, you know, choose that. I can remember the night before I left, I was crying on our porch in Freeland because it was so hard. Because, you know, then you had to give up, you know, your everything at that point. You know, those years when you were entering, 1956. Like
that's when you went
you would never see your family again.
Right.
You would never see your home again. You would, you'd never have children. You know what I mean?
Sure.
So you were going to really, and that was that was what the thinking of the religious life in that day was, to do all of that. You know, and I can remember almost holding on to the banister that I was going to say I was going to do that. You know, and the only intention that was deep in my heart that I was doing it for the love of God, because that was the call that was in me. This search, this desire, this, you know. So that's what I wanted, and I loved the postulant year. It was great. I loved that year.
Was the first year?
First year, yeah.
Say it again. What is it?
Postulant.
Postulant.
That's what it was called then. Now today it's called a candidate.
Oh, candidate.
Postulant.
LAND. Postulant.
And I would be. That you'd be there for a year, you know, and there's pictures of me someplace with postulant. That whole first year, I just loved it. I loved that first year. It was great. And we went to college, you know, and see, I didn't realize that I was going to college because I was being a nun.
Oh, right, sure.
And I can remember Sylvia Haydock. We were good friends, and at one time, like when the laundry would come up, everybody have to fold it, you know. And Sylvia said to me, she said, "Come on," she said, "you can't do that." She said, "You have to study for that test." I said, "Well, who's going to fold these clothes?" And she said, "No," she said, "the test is more important." She said, "You have to pass the test." She said, "Come on." And she'd already been through college, this girl, you know. Yeah. So she knew she had already had her degree. And I remember turning to her, I said, "Sylvia," I said, "why are you so worried about that?" I said, "Why did you say college?" She said, "Because you're in college." I said, "You mean like a regular college?" She said, see, all our classes were in a novitiate, just where you would just get your classes there. You didn't go into like the regular people, the nuns that taught, like say, history, they would come in and teach you in the novitiate. The nuns that taught.
In the, say what it is again?
The novitiate.
Is it the same for like monks being cloistered?
Yeah. Yeah, you'd
spell it?
Novitiate. The novitiate. In novitiate, and it was for like brothers go to the novitiate, you know, sisters like that. It's the same.
But for monks, it's being cloistered. Being cloistered.
And let's see, the thing was in those days, like the order that I went into, the Sisters of Mercy. You have to remember that the church before 64, 63, before Vatican II, that everything in the Catholic Church that we did exactly the same for 400 years.
Wow.
Nothing was changed for 400 years.
Until
1963. You know.
That's Vatican III.
Vatican II.
Vatican II.
And see, so I was like one of the last of the, like our group, you know, because we went through all that very rigorous training.
Wow.
Like, in other words, like when my grandfather died, I couldn't go home to the funeral.
Right.
You know, like today, like you'd see a young girl who's called a candidate, she could go fly in the airplane and go see him, you know. And so our group, the things that we, like, and before me, the sisters that had mothers and fathers that died, they couldn't go to them. You know, so, like, if you're talking to a sister who was like 80 years old, you know, the pain in her to see what's, you know what I mean, like the changes.
Sure.
But Vatican II is the thing that changed everything, you know. And so, like, it's like that whole, it took us 9 years. It took me 9 years to be a sister. You know, you had to have a first-year Protestant, 2 years novitiate, white novice. Then you had 3 years juniorate, and then you had 2 more years that you had to be out in the branch houses. So by the time we were finished, that's why, looking back at it today, that's why most of the religious women, with all the training that we had, when I left there, I had a master's degree and I had a college degree.
Sure.
You know?
Right.
And that's why when we got out, like after when Vatican II came, we found out, like when I was stationed like in Plymouth, the priest that I was working with, I was doing like religious education, everything, he didn't even have a college degree.
Really?
And we didn't, you know, we were just beginning to learn that, you know what I mean? And,
that's wild.
well, see, that's what, by the women then, we became so, that's why we changed so fast, because we realized how, it was almost like what we went through, you know, like, we were American girls in a sense, but we went through all the training of a European person, because that's how they did it in Europe.
Yeah.
That's how they trained people in Ireland to be, and that was brought over, you know, like Frances Ward was the first woman that ever came,
Right.
and she came to Pittsburgh, then she came to Loretto, where we're celebrating 150th this year. Isn't that funny? But that's why after you saw, you know, you really saw what we had been through, what we had, and then you saw how the priest, you know, like they had like they didn't have half of the degrees or the education that we had.
And they didn't have as many rules. And
No, but then we couldn't do anything. Like I couldn't read on the altar, you know. I mean, why couldn't I read? You know what I mean? Like, what was wrong with me? You know, like we couldn't do anything. I mean, like, and our minds started to click. You know, like, my God, you had 9 years of training, and you have these degrees, and these men, they don't even have a college degree, and they're telling all of us. So that's where that's how it all.
So when Vatican II came with Pope,
it was wonderful because